Good morning. What you're going to hear in the jury charge, in terms of reasonable doubt, you're going to hear reason to hesitate. What you're looking for in this case is a reason to hesitate. And in this case, there are many reasons to hesitate. How about the first one? Every word that was just uttered to you would have been used in a trial to try to convict Chris Dontell of murder. Every single fact you have heard just 7 months ago, and it should scare you, would be used to convict Chris Dontell of murder, not Meagan Jackson. And that should horrify you. But let's look at what you're going to hear. You're going to hear, of course, going to tell you about not holding it against the defendant for not testifying. And take that to heart. It's part of your constitutional right. And think about this for a second. When it comes to who didn't testify, you can't consider Meagan Jackson didn't testify, but you should consider the fact that they never put up the chief investigating officer. He never took a stand. You want to know why? He didn't want to co-sign this. He's ashamed of what this case looks like. Because he knows what I know, which is for you to convict Meagan Jackson, you have to believe Chris Dontell. And that's something nobody should have to do. Let's look at what they actually presented to you. Because once you remove Chris Dontell, what you start to see is there's not a whole lot of evidence of a crime, of an actual crime. They've shown to you Meagan Jackson wanted Chris Dontell to have the courage to go tell his wife about their affair. She wanted him to go tell him. That's not a crime. Now, did she do that in ways that maybe we wouldn't agree with? Sure. But her wanting that marriage, that affair to be outed, that is not a crime. And the fact that they're trying to get you over there and make that the case should tell you they have a lot of weakness in their actual case. An actual case requires them to prove things that happened at the time of the crime, which they can't do. Because for 4 years, they've been telling themselves, and anyone who will listen, that this happened at the Myrtle Beach funeral home. It wasn't until 7 months ago that they started telling you it's Flint Lake Apartments. How can you believe and not hesitate when they have shifted the crime scene 4 years later? Does that make any sense? So what did they present? Well, they presented some evidence about where phones were. You got some phone information. Okay. The problem with phone information is this. It doesn't put you in the actual what's going on moment. It doesn't tell you if Meagan Jackson drove Greg Rice alive back to the Myrtle Beach funeral home and dropped him off so that he could talk to Chris Dontell. It doesn't tell you she went inside. It doesn't tell you what's actually happening in the moment. And they knew that coming into this case. Do you think it's a coincidence that he wrote a statement out, Chris Dontell did, and hand-delivered it to Ken Marcus, and an hour later, the state has it changed? I mean, he hand-wrote a statement and told the state he did not see it happen. He was not present. He was not there. That is what he told the state. And an hour later, that's changed. Now all of a sudden, he's an eyewitness to it. If that doesn't give you a reason to hesitate, I don't know what else could. I cannot think of something more important than the fact that that man would change his statement within 1 hour to assist the state to try to convict Meagan Jackson. Tell you what that does. It tells you exactly what he's about. He's about Chris Dontell. He's about himself. That's the reason he wouldn't tell Erica. That's the reason he's pushing Meagan. And that's the reason he killed Greg Rice, because he is about himself. What else did they present? Well, look at some of the other investigators. I have never seen the investigators that took this stand. They looked sad up here. They were ashamed of this. And you should be. I mean, you spent 4 years telling everybody this happened at the Myrtle Beach funeral home. And the one thing that changes your mind on that is the testimony of Chris Dontell. That's the only piece of evidence that changed what they believe happened that night. Can you count on Chris Dontell? They shuffled up 2 dentists. I don't know why. They shuffled up 2 ballistics people. I don't know why. I'll tell you, I do know why. Because if you don't have real evidence of what happened in terms of the crime, what you do is you expand this trial. You go put a bunch of evidence in, so when you go back there, you go, man, look at all this. But ask yourself as you're looking at it, does any of it actually prove what happened? You can piece it all together, but when you get right down to it, you're always going to have to come back to trusting Chris Dontell. And that's the one thing the state didn't want you to have to do, but they could never get around that. Let's talk about some of the things they clearly missed. They want you to believe that she returned a wallet and keys the following day. You might have heard that. The wallet and keys are sitting right there in evidence. Guess what you don't have to go with those? A DNA sample. You talk about easy. You talk about simple. Send the keys off. Have the DNA checked. Comes back Meagan Jackson, you might have a little something. They didn't do that. Oh. Make sure you look at that blanket or that sheet. They want to tell you that sheet is evidence that Meagan Jackson had that in her van. Remember what they told you about it, though? They told you it looked like it came from the Myrtle Beach funeral home. Guess what that evidence was going to look like 4 years ago? 7 months ago. 7 months ago, that evidence was going to be that sheet. That sheet is evidence that Chris Dontell was sitting there in the Myrtle Beach funeral home when Meagan Jackson brought Greg Rice there and he killed him. That isn't a grind staff. She worked for grind staff transport. That was a Myrtle Beach funeral home sheet's what they told you. It's sitting right there with Chris Dontell. The reason they didn't like that is because they could never prove to you, and still haven't to this day, what was going on in her mind. But I think we kind of know. She showed up on October 2nd with what? When they went to the shooting range, what did she have in her car? Blow up Betty. She's still trying to woo Chris Dontell. She got blow up Betty. She's not worried about shooting targets. She's looking to have more sex, and that's what their relationship was about. You could pick any night from the time they started dating, and they are together, they are swapping cars, they're having sex in their car. That's what their relationship was about. And she was true to that on the night of October 2nd. That's what she showed up to do. Do I think she wanted Greg Rice to help her out this affair? I absolutely think she did. Was Greg Rice an imposing guy? Yes, he was. If Greg Rice had a chance to talk to Chris Dontell and tell him, hey man, get your stuff straight, I think he'd have done it. Go tell your wife, I think he'd have done it. And that's what Meagan Jackson wanted him to do. She wanted Greg Rice to help her get Chris Dontell to man up.
Objection, Your Honor. This is all arguing facts, not evidence.
Listen, I'll let her go. Thank you, Your Honor. That's exactly what was going on. That's what they've proven to you, is that she wanted this affair to be outed. That's what they have proven to you. And did she go about it the right way? Maybe not, but she wanted it to be outed. What is also true, when we start talking about motive, her and Greg Rice's relationship, yeah, it's typical ex stuff. They talk a little vulgar to each other. You know, they fight over kids. It's typical marital, ex-marital. There's some nastiness in there. But Greg Rice, having him in her life was a benefit to her. They made a big deal out telling you she's not the best mother. Well, guess what a mother who's struggling needs? Help. Getting rid of Greg Rice gets rid of her help. There is no motive there. But think about Chris Dontell on the other hand. Chris Dontell is getting word that he's about to lose Erica, could be losing Meagan, and that Greg Rice is complicating his life and is going to out his affair. There's a text. If he sees Erica, he's going to tell her. So the only person that actually has a motive, a true motive, to get rid of Greg Rice is Chris Dontell. And can you trust him? Can you trust him? Well, let's consider some reasons why maybe not. Got a little list here. Reasons that you should not trust Chris Dontell. He doesn't even recall his plea. Doesn't even recall his plea. He sat up here 7 months ago, took the plea, or he slithered his way out of the murder charge, and he doesn't remember. His handwritten statement to Marcus. His handwritten statement to Marcus that he changed within 1 hour. That's the second reason. He sat here and told you he was scared of Meagan Jackson and that he's sleeping with her. After this occurs, and he tells you, she did it and I had to watch it, I had to watch it all. He's sleeping with her. Do you think that that's really, can you believe that? No, you can't believe that. How about this, man? They slipped this right by you. The only person who has Greg Rice's blood on them is Chris Dontell. That's it, guys. The case should be over. The only person with blood on their shoe is Chris Dontell. How about this? He tried to tell you that Meagan Jackson went home after this, went from Lowe's, they went home and she showered. She got all changed up. Had to get the blood off of her. Well, guess what? If you saw the surveillance video footage, when they go back to Lowe's, she's wearing the same exact thing she was wearing when she left Lowe's the first time. She hadn't changed her clothes. She was wearing the same black scrubs. Can't trust Chris Dontell. Who disposed of the body? Who disposed of the body? Chris Dontell. Does he strike you as the kind of guy who's going to do you a favor? Is that the guy you want to go to for a favor? He is the most selfish person I've ever seen. He sat up here and told you he disposed of the body as some kind of favor. You ain't buying that. You can't. You know what? He did a lot. I called him Chris Dontell, full of lies and cries. I'll tell you when he wasn't crying. He wasn't crying when he was shopping in Lowe's. Just grabbing cinder blocks and tarps, stick them in his grocery cart, and let's grab the Pepsi. He was mortified about what had happened. He looked pretty casual there to me. I don't know about you. How about that very sweet wife of his who sat up here and remains committed to him after he sent these heartfelt texts about how much he loved her and was going to stay with her after he killed Chris Dontell. He's still sleeping with Meagan Jackson. Can't trust him. How about the fact he's seen sneaking around looking for a key at a Myrtle Beach funeral home? Can't trust him. How about the fact he lies to Meagan Jackson about where he found that key? Can't trust him. How about the fact that blow up Betty is not very good target practice? Not much of a marksman myself, but I'm pretty sure if you shoot an inflated object, it just explodes the one time you shoot it. That would be the worst target practice I've ever heard of. You would want something that would withstand some gunshots. Can't trust him. And if at all you find yourself in some crazy way wanting to trust this man, I don't think you would. If I told you, he's up here testifying, trying to get his plea reduced. That's why he's here. He's here for who? He's here for himself. That's what he's here. I'll tell you something that really makes me not trust the state, frankly. Not just them having people's phones, but what makes me not trust the state. How about how they're doing you with Chris Dontell? When it suits them, he's their buddy. Hand of one is the hand of all. Meagan Jackson, Chris Dontell's hands, they'll tell you we're in the cookie jar together. Well, then he takes a plea. His plea makes it impossible for him to be charged with murder. The state took his hand out of the jar. Here's what's wicked, man. Here is so wicked. And they bring him back up here and let him testify in a way where they're going to ask you to consider the hand of one and the hand of all. So what are they going to do? They're going to stick it back in the jar. When it suits them, they're going to stick it back in the jar. As soon as we leave here, they take it right back out. That's crooked. See what else they're going to do? They're going to ask you to believe a man they don't believe. They're asking you to trust Chris Dontell, and they don't trust him. You know why this conspiracy charge is gone? The court decided not enough evidence to support the conspiracy charge, you no longer have it.
Objection, Your Honor.
This day,
Move to strike.
I strike that. That's a matter of law.
When it comes down to the hand of one is the hand of all, that is there, and I knew it in the opening statement, from the ringing bell, I knew it. We were in for a wild ride, because when you're trying to count on that to prove somebody guilty of murder, you know you have a weak case. You know you do, man. If you can't put Meagan Jackson on the scene, of course they don't have a scene here, you know your case is weak. I'll tell you what really worries me. It's not that they don't trust Chris Dontell. I mean, I know they don't trust Chris Dontell. You don't trust Chris Dontell. But what I find offensive about their position is they don't trust you. They don't trust you. Because if they trusted you, they would tell you that the case we put up here, the case we put up as the state, banks on Chris Dontell telling you she just jumped out and started shooting. I had no idea what was going to happen. That's what he told you. That is their case. That's evidence they put into the record. But now they want you to just bypass some of that. Weird stuff. So what happened? Mr. Britton, give us some theories. Well, here's the evidence in the record. Pretty simple. You can consider reverse truth. Very common. Co-defendant will strike up here, testify against their defendant, and tell you exactly what they did and put it on the other person. Meagan Jackson, sitting in the car with Chris Dontell, they pull up, Chris Dontell gets out and starts shooting. And she had no idea he was going to do it. And that is, you can believe that all day long. That is as likely, and when it comes to motive, much more likely than the fact that Meagan Jackson would get rid of her father, or the father of her children. But that's really not what this case, in my opinion, look, if you look at Flint Lake Apartments as a crime scene, it kind of falls apart. I don't know. I mean, they have a witness who tells you gunshots are fired there all the time. I don't know. Maybe you believe that. Maybe you don't. I find that pretty hard to believe. I find it hard to believe that when they're out there 9 times, nobody says, okay, listen, I'm going to tell you, we got gunshots out here all the time. I heard some, but I didn't say anything to you the first 4 times you were here because I didn't think it was all that important. Because we just, we don't ever report it. I find that extremely hard to believe. I find it hard to believe that they claim she's out there picking up evidence the next day and nobody sees that either, in broad daylight, with her kids running around. That don't make any sense to me. That don't make any sense to me. And it didn't to them either. So you should not feel bad about that. If that does not make sense to you, you should feel good with that. Because it doesn't make any sense. And that's why the state didn't believe it. And that's why the chief investigating officer didn't testify. It's because their original position on this is probably what happened. And then you can read into the evidence. She goes and she picks him up. And she gets him to the Myrtle Beach Funeral Home alive. And their problem is they can't tell you what happened after that. They can't blame her. And since the snake has already slithered out of the room, they can't blame him. But I can promise you, as soon as once you make that decision, Flint Lake Apartments is an unlikely spot. You have your reasons to hesitate. And the rest of this case falls at Myrtle Beach Funeral Home, where they themselves believe it falls. Dave, the court's indulgence for a second, Your Honor.
All right.
Just in closing, I would just say, when you get back there, what you really follow the court's instructions, but just ask yourself at the end of the day, do you trust Chris Dontell? Because the only way you can convict her is if you trust that man. And I don't think you can. Thank you.